Good morning, and welcome to the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende. I'm the Reverend Tom Rosiello, the minister of the fellowship. And today I welcome you from beautiful Lake Winnipeg here in Ashburnham, Massachusetts. 21,000 years ago, glaciers retreated from this area and formed these lakes and mountains. 12,000 years ago, Paleo-Indian hunters, the first known inhabitants of Massachusetts, likely hunted and fished in these areas. 500 years ago, the Abenaki, Wabanaki, and Pennacook made their home and prospered here. We're not far from the Mohawk Trail, the major Native American trading route that connected the Atlantic tribes with those in upstate New York. Sadly, disease, particularly smallpox brought by white settlers, and war devastated these tribes, reduced their numbers dramatically. And about 200 years ago, this area was dotted with white farms. Then 100 years ago, something else happened. Industrialization came to this area. This lake was dammed for mills in Fitchburg, which is a few miles down the road. The damming increased the size of the lake to what it is presently. And interestingly, small parcels of land were made available to the immigrant workers who came mostly from Finland if they wished to build a cottage or sauna here, either for a bonus or for sale to them. And that's how our cottage came into being. And Malcolm and I now occupy what's known as Camp Nightingale. Malcolm and I want to acknowledge that we are on Native American land, land of people who were killed by disease and war, land who was taken by white settlers. We also want to acknowledge that there is other history on this land, including the effects of industrialization and immigration. We are grateful to be the temporary caretakers of this property. Now, this area, the Monadnock region, has inspired art and music and literature. We're about 20 minutes from Peterborough, New Hampshire, the Our Town of Thornton Wilder's Our Town. Also the home of the MacDowell Colony, a place where the American composer Edward MacDowell did his work, and also a place that he and his wife after him shared with musicians and artists by establishing little cottages where they could come and do their artistic endeavors during the summer. The piano music in today's service comes from those composers and from that colony. The first two pieces are by Edward MacDowell himself, and they depict the beauty and the serenity of this area. The piano postlude is by Amy Beach, who spent time at the colony and composed there as well. So in a moment, we're going to now go inside this cottage to hear the first piece, the prelude, which is To a Water Lily by Edward MacDowell. It'll be played on an old upright piano built in this area and probably similar to the ones that those composers used in those little cottages at the MacDowell colony. Thank you, Malcolm, for that musical invitation into our sacred time. A time when we pause, letting go of the pressures and distractions of our week to go to a deeper place of honest reflection. Also, a time when we come together in a circle of beloved community to be renewed in our caring for each other and for the world. A circle we must be always drawing wider to welcome new people, not just people like us, but especially those different from us. We make a special effort to welcome those who may be marginalized or excluded from other religious traditions because of race or ethnicity, gender identification, sexual orientation, or simply because what they believe is not accepted in that tradition. It's a time when we let our guard down, when we open ourselves to new ideas, a time when we focus on the needs of others, but also on care for ourselves. A time when we share and when we listen with spiritual openness to both the music and the spoken words of our service and to that still small voice speaking within us. Each week, we mark this time as separate from other time, as dedicated to higher purpose and deeper thought by lighting a flaming chalice. The chalice is the bowl of our community, the flame, the light of our faith tradition. It is a light of love and caring, of justice and inclusion. It is both a guide for us on our journey and a beacon of welcome for those in need of a spiritual home who might wish to be part of this beloved community. And now we go to Dan Nushma, our president, to share news important to our community.
Good morning. I add my welcome to all of you. I'm pleased to announce an upcoming fellowship-sponsored two-part seminar on charitable giving for U.S. and Canadian citizens. This seminar will provide practical estate planning information and tax-saving techniques for people at all income and wealth levels. Part one, this coming week on July 14th at 1 p.m., will cover tax-effective charitable giving strategies that can benefit your estate, your loved ones, and the causes you believe in. Part two, on July 21st at 1 p.m., will cover how to donate Mexican assets. These sessions are free, but donations to the UUFSMA Endowment Fund are appreciated. To register, please contact Diana Amaya at the email in the chat box and see more information in the order of service and newsletter. Now I have a few thoughts from our COVID-19 task force, a group of health professionals and care team members with expertise relevant to this pandemic. Most of us are privileged to have been vaccinated, and we look forward to gathering together again safely in person. You'll hear more about those plans soon. But should we also be tempted to drop our safety precautions in and out of our homes? Please be aware of some of our concerns. First, we know that only 15% of Mexicans are fully vaccinated, and many unvaccinated tourists, both Mexican and foreign, are filling our town, especially on weekends. Second, we are certain that the highly contagious Delta variant is widespread in Mexico, including in San Miguel. And third, though our vaccines protect us from serious illness and hospitalization, they don't fully protect us from catching and transmitting COVID, especially the Delta variant. So, under what circumstances should you continue to wear effective face masks? First, in your home, if you have visitors or household workers with unvaccinated or uncertain vaccine status. And outside your home, if there's any chance you'll be closer than 6 feet or 2 meters from anyone with unvaccinated or uncertain vaccine status. For example, I always wear a mask when leaving the house to walk on the streets in San Miguel. In these settings, mask wearing is the UU thing to do. So please stay safe and be well, my friends. Now, please join Diego Vargas and me in reciting our spoken covenant, which should appear on your screen. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
We now enter into a sacred time in our service when members and friends are invited to share significant milestones, joys, sorrows, and concerns with their community. If you have one of those that you would like to have shared in a future service, please email it to me. If you have one that you would like to share this morning but have not emailed it in, please go ahead and type it into the chat now. For each joy, sorrow, or concern, we'll light a candle indicating that that thought, that prayer, that person is with us in community this morning. This is a candle of remembrance for Jonathan Curtis Wolfe, husband of Joan Wolfe, who passed away at the age of 72 peacefully at his home here in San Miguel on Monday, after living courageously for the past 7 years with Lewy body dementia. Upon his passing, Margot Johnson wrote this poem, and Joan suggested that I might share it with you this morning. It's entitled John's Release. He took flight today, eager to find his way, soaring to unknown vistas, exploring unrestrained. Limitations abandoned, unshackled from the past. Horizons and valleys, plains and oceans, seen through a pioneer's eyes. Oh, the wonders awaiting a soul soaring with joy. He took flight today, eager to find his way. Our second candle is one of support for Joan and recognition of the wonderful care John received all these years from her and his team of caregivers led by Jamaki, who moved to Mexico with them to care for John 3.5 years ago. Being a caregiver for someone seriously ill is not easy, and this is a candle of gratitude for all those who give of their love and skill to care for the infirmed among us. This candle is one of support for those among us who struggle with mental illness, which for some has been exacerbated by the COVID isolation. We light this candle for them and send them our thoughts. This is a candle of concern. A concern for a true awakening to the climate crisis and its effect, as illustrated by the extreme weather many have been experiencing this week. Our thoughts go to them, those who have suffered because of the weather, and also to the awakening of our thoughts in terms of the effect of climate change on all of us. This candle is simply for the joy of beloved community, this beloved community, ever deepening and ever expanding, a community which is there for each of us in times of joy and in times of struggle. And a final candle for all those joys, sorrows, and concerns held deep in our heart, but which remain unspoken this morning. I invite you to take all of them, spoken and unspoken, into a time of reflection, meditation, and prayer, first guided by a prayer written by the Reverend David Blanchard, and then by music shared by Malcolm. This prayer is called a blessing. Spirit of life, we sense your presence in our lives and in the connections we form with one another. We seek not to ask for blessings withheld, but rather for the insight to recognize blessings already bestowed, the humility of gratitude, and the wisdom of praise. We feel the blessings of those who love embraces us always. Our spirits are blessed by the tears and the laughter that come to us from every opportunity to learn and love. May these hidden blessings be felt among us now. Amen. Shalom. May it be so.
Good morning. My name is Gary Belkin. I'm the treasurer of our fellowship and also a member of the board, as well as being a member of the Sunday Service Committee. We work to be a caring community to each other and to those around us. To that end, we support a number of organizations that better the lives of our Mexican neighbors. One of the organizations we support is Patronato Pro Niños. When we think about Patronato Pro Niños, we think about their 6 mobile clinics that they take to the small rural villages to provide medical services and, even more importantly, dental services. The water that serves many of the rural villages has high levels of arsenic and fluoride. This is caused by the overuse of groundwater to water crops. Water with these high levels of fluoride cause children and adults to have rotting, blackened teeth, an affliction that leads to many health and learning problems. Last year, Patronato Pro Niños provided dental, medical, nutritional, and psychological services to more than 5,000 children. Our UU Fellowship donated over $5,600 this year, $5,000 of which is being used for radio broadcasts. For many of the rural communities, there is no electricity, internet, or TV. Their only news comes from the radio. Everyone in these rural villages listens to the radio. Through our grant, we pay for radio time so villagers know where Patronato Pro Niños will be for services. The other portion of the grant provides partial funding for the psychologist. Our UU funding of Patronato Pro Niños makes a tremendous difference in the lives of many of our Mexican neighbors. Please give generously during the offering musical interlude. Thank you.
De ti yo recibo, a ti te doy, así compartimos y vivimos hoy. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we
I'd like to share a story with you that comes to us from the Buddhist tradition. Once upon a time in an ancient Chinese village, there was an old woman. She had two large pots, each hung on the opposite ends of a pole that she carried across her shoulders, and she used it to bring water to her home from the nearby stream. One of the pots had a crack in it, while the other pot was perfect. The perfect pot always delivered a full portion of water to her home. But after the long walk from the stream to the old woman's house, the cracked pot arrived only half full, having dripped out water all the way back from the river. Of course, the perfect pot was proud of its accomplishments, but the poor cracked pot, ashamed of its imperfection. One day, while by the stream, the cracked pot spoke to the woman. It said to the woman, "I'm ashamed of myself because this crack in my side causes water to leak out all the way back to your home." The old woman smiled and said, "Did you notice that there are flowers growing on your side of the path, but none on the other side?" This message, the message of today's service, comes in many ways and in many forms from many traditions and many messengers. We now move from that ancient Chinese Buddhist story to an ancient Japanese art form called kintsugi, as interpreted in song by Peter Mayer.
I'm like one of those Japanese bowls that were made long ago. I have some cracks in me. They have been filled with gold. That's what they used back then. They had a bowl to mend. It did not hide the cracks. It made them shine instead. So now every old scar shows from every time I broke, and anyone's eyes can see I'm not what I used to be. But in a collector's mind, all of these jagged lines make me more beautiful and worth a much higher price. I'm like one of those Japanese bowls. I was made long ago. I have some cracks you can see how they shine of gold.
Forget your perfect offerings. There's a crack in everything. That's what lets the light in, or what waters the flowers. Don't hide the crack, fill it with gold. It adds beauty to the object or the person. It makes it more valuable. In other words, let go of that preoccupation with perfectionism, those perfectionist tendencies and the judgment and anger and disappointment that comes when we make a mistake, when we fall short. Embrace what those errors, those imperfections have to teach us. And don't get stuck in insisting upon what you think is perfect in others. Let go. See things differently. Grow spiritually. Live happier. And have more to share with the world. Find the blessings in the imperfections. Well, that's the message in a nutshell. But for me, it's been a hard lesson to learn. These teachings are ones with which I still struggle, and I bet I'm not alone. I also feel that in this time of COVID, of Zoom services, of living on a computer, of being cooped up, perhaps it's made us even less tolerant of the imperfections in ourselves and in others, and more driven to get it exactly right, perfect, or to want it exactly perfect, as we define perfect. This morning I'd like to reflect with you a bit on this drive we have towards perfection, this expectation we have of ourselves and others, and even our institutions and organizations like our fellowship. I want to explore how, if we could let go of some of that, we might find beauty, value, even truth, even blessings in the imperfections. Now, for those of you who have endured some of my unproofread emails, you know that this perfectionist streak in me does not hold sway over all aspects of my life. But in many ways, I have indeed felt the need to be perfect, or at least as close to that as is humanly possible. Psychiatrists tell us that we pick up this trait, like many others, at a very early age. And I think I got that need to be perfect, to be the best and nothing less, and to expect the same from others at a pretty early age. I believe, at least in part, I got it from my father. My father was a wonderful man in many ways, but he was one of those people who found faults with everything you do and instilled this idea that everything you did had to be perfect. He insisted on it in himself and in others, and he had little patience with falling short, even slightly. If I brought home an exam paper from school with a grade of 99, he would ask, "Why didn't you get 100?" But I think there is more to this than just the tendency towards perfectionism that some of us have just as a behavior that we think of as living up to our parents' expectations. Perfectionism in some part of your life can also be a way of compensating for some other part where you may feel inadequate. It took me a long time to accept the fact that I, like other gay men of my age, suffered from what has come to be known as the best little boy in the world syndrome. The idea that we have to be better than the next person at whatever we do so that being gay won't be held against us. Now, I know women in the professional and business worlds who have had a similar experience of driving towards perfectionism as a way of compensating for being female. There is a sense that if you are so good in some way, then your boss or your neighbor or even your family will have to accept you, even if they have a negative view of some other part of you. I have to acknowledge now that sometimes true greatness emerges from this kind of struggle. For many years, Malcolm and I shared our home with Uncle T, a famous concert pianist. He grew up at a time when the world wasn't even using the word gay, and he was ostracized and discriminated against because of who he was. He threw himself into his piano studies and became a truly great concert pianist, winning the Naumburg Award in 1940. And he often said, I had to play perfectly so they would not hold who I was against me. There certainly are many other stories of greatness that follow this path, but it can also be a behavior that is very unhealthy and destructive in our lives and in the lives of those around us. You know, it's great to be motivated to do a good job, and I'm not encouraging a sloppy and irresponsible way of life or a failure to live up to one's potential, but rather to suggest we be a little easier on ourselves and on others around us. The strive for perfectionism can really hold us back from so many things. The perfectionist's unending focus on what's wrong can cause us to overlook what's wonderful. We can get really stuck in our perfectionism, and it can preclude us from creatively moving on to the next chapter in our lives. I have a friend who's a very well-known Provincetown painter and who has a very heavy dose of perfectionist tendencies. Several years ago, she traveled to the area where she grew up, and she found her favorite tree still standing in the middle of a field. She got out the canvas and the paints and began to work. She took photographs so that she could use them to finish the painting when she got back to her studio. When she returned, she worked and worked on that painting for months, redoing this branch, that branch, changing the way the light cast its shadow. She even sanded the painting to try and change its effect. She didn't want to show it to anyone because it was not finished. She had not yet got it right. She was still fixing it. I did see the painting in several of its different incarnations, and they were all beautiful. But to her, it was not right. It was not perfect. She would spend entire days on that painting, and she was unable to move on to another. Her perfectionism, her desire to have this tree exactly right, held her from moving on and truly crippled her creativity. The author that some of you know, Julia Cameron, in her book, The Artist's Way, writes, perfectionism has nothing to do with getting it right. It has nothing to do with fixing things. It has nothing to do with standards. Perfectionism is the refusal to let yourself move ahead. It's a loop, an obsessive, debilitating closed system that causes you to get stuck in the details of what you're writing or painting or making and to lose sight of the whole. Instead of creating freely and allowing errors to reveal themselves later as insight, you often get mired in getting the details right. We correct our originality into uniformity that lacks passion and spontaneity. I have to say that I find those words to be rather stinging comments and maybe just even a bit overstated, but I get the point, and it hits home. What I often have to remind myself, and what my artist friend could not grasp, was expressed by Paul Gardner this way. A painting's never finished. It simply stops at an interesting place. It's not just a painting that we feel this way about. It could be a business proposal, a book you're writing, decorating your home, a sermon. All are really never finished to the perfectionist. There's always one more thing that you could tweak. Often I have the feeling that if I had more time, the sermon could be better. There's still words to change and ideas to develop. I could skip dinner with Malcolm and keep on working, or I could not make that pastoral call that I was going to make to keep working on the sermon. Or I can let go and accept the fact that it's good, or at least okay, and call it done. And again, I'm not suggesting that we should be lazy and not strive for high standards in our work, but there's a time to stop and say, what I've done is good. The late Unitarian Universalist minister Peter Fleck suggested that there's some theological precedent for being happy with less than perfection. Turns us to the Bible story of the 7-day creation. And at the end of each day in that story, God inspects his work and pronounces, it is good. Interestingly, you would have thought God to proclaim it perfect, not just good. As I read that story again this week, my reaction was, wow, a report cut of all B's. You mean God didn't get any A's for this creation stuff? Why was each aspect of creation just good? Fleck suggests it's because creation is not complete. There's more to come. If it were perfect, there would be no need for human creativity. If it were perfect, it would be over. It seems to me that God in the Genesis story is saying that creation is good enough for the moment. For a real perfectionist, very little ever lives up to their standards. Have you ever heard about a person or a place and developed such an image or an expectation in your mind that when you finally meet that person or visit that place, which you thought would be perfectly wonderful, you're disappointed because it didn't match your idea? When I was buying a home, I would have this experience. I'd review the real estate listing in great detail, look at all the pictures and read about it, and apply my vision of the perfect house to it. I would see the entire home in my head. And when I got to the house, I was always disappointed. Plato had something to say about this. He taught his students that only the idea of something is perfect, and its realization, its expression in material worldly terms, a mere shadow of that perfection. The medical profession tells us that perfectionism is not good for your health. It can literally break your heart, but it can also break the hearts of those around you. Perfectionists tend to live their life looking for what's wrong and trying to fix it. Do you always see or frequently see what's wrong in your spouse, your partner, your friend, your children? Is that how you approach them? Sure, kids need to be told when they're doing something wrong, and well-intended suggestions to a partner or a friend can be useful. But it's not the way to affirm a relationship. And like human beings, the institutions that we create are equally imperfect. This one, our fellowship, and our Unitarian Universalist Association, both are not perfect institutions. There's always things that we don't get right. And truth is, what is perceived as perfect for one person at one point in time is not for another at another time. So we go down many roads. Some take us to successful places, but other times we miss the mark. Sometimes when folks first come to a church or fellowship like ours, they're excited and they perceive it as perfect, only to be disappointed later when they realize it is not. You need to know we are imperfect, but you also need to know that just may be our greatest blessing. It is in embracing our imperfections that we find the resources to accept others with their imperfections, reconcile differences, comfort and be comforted, and to love and not judge others. It can also be the source of our creativity and our openness to new ideas and a gateway to a wonderful future. I, for one, don't want a perfect fellowship, for that's a stagnant institution where very little new is happening. Someone once said that church is a place where you can make mistakes. And sure, at times those mistakes will be aggravating or disappointing, but those imperfections can also be the cracks that let the light in and allow us to see things differently. As institutions and as individuals, we need to let our errors reveal themselves as insights. Many of you know that I've spent the first 20 years or so of my professional life as a trial lawyer, and part of that time as an assistant district attorney. And you could probably guess that perfection for a trial lawyer is winning the case. And for a DA, it's getting a conviction. And I remember that perfectionist drive. But I also remember a case I prosecuted as a young assistant DA. I remember not fully interrogating a witness prior to the trial, a witness who was accusing another person of a very serious crime. In the middle of the trial, it became clear to me that I was doing a pretty good job of prosecuting an innocent person who might well get convicted and be punished. So I asked for a recess and confronted that witness in my office, who eventually confessed his lying to me. I was wrong in prosecuting the case, and I should have known that. I had to be very public in acknowledging that. I did, and the case was dismissed on my motion. My error in this case gave me new insight into how to approach a case, how to evaluate a witness. And even with the pain of a bit of public humiliation, the light of justice came through the cracks. Had I not made that error and acknowledged that error, I'm not sure when that insight which blessed my career would have come to me. It was a pretty big mistake. I could have just pushed on with the trial in order to try and maintain my near perfect courtroom record. But instead, my career and my life was blessed by the mistake. And I like to think the lives of others were too, certainly the person on trial. But years later, when I was supervising other young DAs, I stopped the practice of calculating conviction rate scores for their evaluation. And I knew the better DA, the one to promote, was not the one with the highest conviction rate, not the one driven to have perfect score. This is just one example in my life of where letting go of the desire to be perfect, acknowledging and embracing a mistake, opened me to new insight. In working with church volunteers in my next career and supervising a fairly large church staff, I learned that insisting on my idea of perfection in their work was not healthy for them, or for me, or for the institution. It stifled creativity, discouraged taking a risk, and held us back from embracing change. But we learned. We learned to value relationships over accomplishments, cooperation over competition. And we created an environment where we could discuss the opportunities that lie in our individual or collective missteps. Now, I've come to believe that what the liberal church, liberal religion is all about is learning to live the best we can in this world with the creativity, the love, and the compassion that our own imperfections teach us. The perfect church or fellowship sits still, but the one that lets the light shined through the cracks of its imperfection, is on the move to a richer, deeper, happier future. The poet William Stafford wrote, "Your exact errors make a music. Your straying feet find the great dance. And you live on a world where stumbling always leads home." By embracing our imperfections, our creativity continues to flow. Our errors may just be the route to the new chapter in our life. Even from the world of science, we can learn the importance of the imperfect. One Lewis Thomas wrote this: "We know a lot about DNA, but if our kind of mind had been confronted with the problem of designing a similar replicating molecule, we'd never have succeeded. We would have made one fatal mistake. Our molecule would have been perfect. The capacity for blunder slightly is the real marvel of DNA. Without this special attribute, we would still be anaerobic bacteria, and there would be no music." Well, maybe it's counterintuitive. We're so programmed to strive for perfection and the best. It takes a lot to push back against that drive, to embrace our imperfections as well as our successes, and to live in less perfect, but healthier, happier, more honest, and more meaningful ways. Well, again, here I am coming to the end of a sermon. And what am I thinking? It's not perfect. If I spend more time on it, it could be better. Well, I'm going to try and follow my own advice. I'm going to declare it good, at least okay. Certainly not the final word on the subject, but hopefully an interesting place to stop. So I give it to you as my imperfect offering. I hope there's a little light in it to share, even if it comes through the cracks. Blessed are the cracks, for they let in the light. And now I invite you to join in singing a hymn of gratitude for all that is our lives, the perfect and the imperfect, the wonderful and the difficult.
Good morning. I'm Fred Jodry. Aren't you excited that it's May? Today we're going to sing hymn 128, For All That Is Our Life. I'll give Arlen a moment to get back to the words so you can join in if you are feeling inspired to sing along.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build a common good and to make our own days glad. For needs which others serve,
We're so glad that you've been with us today and hope you'll stay on to be part of our discussion groups, which will start right after Malcolm plays the postlude. We also hope that you'll join us again next week for what I know is going to be a fascinating, wonderful service by the Reverend Tanya Marquez. Tanya is a Mexican woman and a fronteriza, raised in Mexico and having lived in the U.S. at the border for 25 years. Her Mexican heritage and her experience on the border region informs her preaching. She'll be drawing on the song Cantares in a sermon entitled Wanderers. The song is by Joan Manuel Serrata, Spanish singer, using some of the poetry of Antonio Machado, a famous 20th century Spanish poet. And we hope you'll join us for that. If you're new with us today or recently, rather than select a breakout room, it would be great if you stay in the main room so that I and a member of our welcoming team can personally welcome you. If you're not yet a member and are finding this community as your spiritual home, we'd love to have you join us and become a member. Just check out that information on our website, uufsma.org. And remember, even after we go back to in-person services soon, our services and many of our other events will still be on Zoom as well, so you can be a member of this fellowship from wherever you are. We now extinguish the flame. But not the light of truth, not the fire of commitment, and not the warmth of love and compassion that we carry with us for the week ahead. May that be the light that comes through the cracks of the less than perfect vessels that are our lives and our community. And may peace be with you until we meet again.